When they entered the palace seeking shelter from the storm, they still had no idea that the palace already knew all 4 of their names. Inside, they found 4 chairs for plates, and beside each plate was written one of their names. But there was one more chair at the table. Who was that 5th chair meant for? And why did a photograph taken 20 years ago show 4 faces that looked exactly like them? They would discover the most terrifying truth much later. This was not the first time the palace had seen them. They had been here 20 years ago, but back then, they were only children, and every memory of that night had been erased from their minds. Tonight, they had returned, and beneath the palace, the 7th door was waiting for them. A door that, once opened, would never let anyone return as the same person. And if you think this is where the story ends, you still don't know what the most terrifying secret of that night really was. Because the palace was not alone. Someone was still waiting for them. It was almost midnight. Istanbul was being swallowed by one of the worst storms anyone could remember. Rain wasn't simply falling that night. It felt as if the entire sky had broken open. Heavy drops hammered against the windshield of the car so hard that even the wipers, moving at their fastest setting, could barely clear the road. Every few minutes, thunder shook the night. A deep rumble, a few seconds of silence, and then, crack. Another violent explosion of thunder rolled across the sky. Inside the car, 4 friends had gone completely quiet. Arif kept both hands tightly wrapped around the steering wheel. Beside him, Marin kept staring through the passenger window. In the back seat, Rafi and Samir had been joking and talking only 20 minutes earlier. Now neither of them said a word, because they all knew something was wrong. They had taken the wrong road. Their destination was a small hotel on the other side of the city. But the storm had flooded several roads, and their GPS had redirected them onto an old route. A route that passed beside the abandoned grounds of an old Ottoman palace associated with the reign of Sultan Suleiman. People rarely came this way at night, and almost nobody came here during storms. Marin suddenly spoke in a quiet voice. Arif. Yeah. Check the GPS again. Arif didn't take his eyes off the road. I'm checking. Where exactly are we? For several seconds, nobody answered. Then Arif slowly said, We're passing the palace. Rafi tried to laugh. So, what's the problem? We drive past it and keep going. Samir stared through the rear window. The problem is, he paused. This road isn't even supposed to be here. Silence filled the car again. Arif looked down at his phone. The blue navigation line really did look strange. It continued forward through an area where there should have been no public road at all. There were no houses, no stores, no streetlights, no people, only dark trees, wet stone walls, and, beyond the curtain of rain, the enormous shadow of an ancient structure. Then Marin suddenly pressed her hand against the window. What is that? Everyone looked. Through the sheets of rain, they could see a massive iron gate in the distance. Beyond it stood the dark outline of the old palace grounds. But something about it was impossible to ignore. There was a light burning inside. One single light. Warm yellow. Steady. It looked like someone had left a lantern burning in the middle of centuries of darkness. Arif slowed the car. Does someone still live here? Rafi said. Maybe there's a security guard. Samir shook his head. Tonight? In this weather? Before anyone could answer, lightning tore across the sky. For one brief second, The entire palace wall was illuminated as brightly as daylight. And in that flash, they saw someone standing inside the gate. A tall figure, dressed completely in black, head lowered, perfectly still. Marin's face went pale. "Don't stop the car." Arif frowned. "Why?" "There's someone standing in there." Arif gave a nervous laugh. "It's probably just a person." Marin whispered. "No." I saw his face. "What did you see?" Marin didn't answer, because at that exact moment, the light inside the gate went out, completely, and the figure in black disappeared with it. Nobody spoke. Arif pressed harder on the accelerator, but then, the engine died. Once, twice, and then there was nothing. The car was completely silent, except for the rain, and the distant growl of thunder. Rafi spoke quietly. "Arif." "Yeah." "Why did the car stop?" Arif turned the key. Nothing happened. He tried again. The engine refused to start. Then Samir suddenly pointed toward the gate. "Look." Everyone turned. The iron gate, which had been completely closed only moments earlier, was now slowly opening. Creak. The sound of the old metal gate cut through the storm. And beyond it, the warm yellow light appeared again. But this time, there wasn't one light. There were two, then three, then more. One by one, dark windows across the palace began glowing from within. Marin's voice trembled. "We can't stay here." Arif looked at the road. "The storm is too strong. We can't walk anywhere." Samir pointed toward something beside the gate. A weathered stone plaque stood half hidden beneath moss and rainwater. For a moment, lightning illuminated the writing. Only a few words were clearly visible. "When the palace lights return." The rest of the inscription was covered in moss. Arif decided they had only one choice. They would have to leave the car, run through the storm, and take shelter inside the palace. They didn't know it yet, but once they crossed that doorway, all four of them would not come back out together, because someone was already inside, someone who had been waiting for them for a very, very long time. And that night, he finally knew they had arrived. For several seconds, nobody moved. The corridor had disappeared into complete darkness. The four friends could hear only one thing: the rain. It hammered against the palace windows with unbelievable force. Then came the thunder. Boom. The ancient walls seemed to tremble. Marin grabbed Arif's arm. "Don't move." Arif whispered. Nobody moved. Samir raised his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam appeared, but it was strangely weak. It illuminated only a few feet of the corridor. Beyond that, there was nothing. No lanterns, no paintings, no doors, just darkness. Rafi swallowed hard. "Where's the door?" Nobody answered. The wooden door they had been standing in front of only seconds earlier was gone. Arif moved his flashlight slowly across the wall. Nothing. Just an ancient stone wall. Solid. As if the doorway had never existed. Marin whispered, "We need to get back to the entrance." They turned around and stopped. The corridor behind them was no longer the same. It seemed much longer, much darker, and the entrance door was nowhere in sight. Samir's voice trembled. "Guys." He pointed toward the floor. The wet footprints were still there, but now there were more of them. A second trail had appeared beside their own, for footprints had become 8. Someone else had been walking behind them. Rafi slowly turned around. There was nobody there. Then, another footprint appeared, right in front of them. Wet, fresh, still dripping with water. The 4 friends froze. Another footprint appeared, then another, slowly moving toward them, one step at a time. Closer, closer, closer. Marin covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Arif raised his flashlight toward the darkness. Nothing, but the footprints continued appearing, until they stopped directly in front of Marin. Silence. Then a voice came from somewhere inside the darkness. A very quiet voice, almost a whisper. "You came back." Marin's eyes widened. Arif immediately grabbed her hand. "Run." They turned and ran. Their footsteps echoed through the ancient corridor. Rafi nearly slipped on the wet stone floor. Samir grabbed him and pulled him forward. Behind them, something began walking. Slowly. Heavy footsteps. 1, 2, 3. The sound followed them through the darkness. They ran faster. Then suddenly Arif saw a faint golden light ahead. That way. They rushed toward it. The light came from a large room with an enormous wooden table in the center. Dozens of candles were burning around the room. But there was something strange about them. None of the flames moved, even though wind was blowing through the broken windows. The four friends stopped at the doorway. They stared at the room. On the table, there were 4 cups, 4 plates, and 4 chairs. Everything had already been prepared, as if someone had known exactly how many people would arrive. Rafi whispered, "This isn't possible." Samir slowly stepped closer. "Maybe someone lives here." Arif shook his head. "No." He pointed toward the table. There was dust everywhere, except around the 4 plates. Those places were completely clean, freshly prepared. Marin noticed something else. Each plate had a name written beside it. Arif, Marin, Rafi, Samir. Her face went completely pale. "No." She stepped backward. "No, no, no." Arif looked down. His name was written on the table. So were the others. Then, a 5th chair slowly moved by itself. Scrape. The wooden legs dragged across the stone floor. Everyone stared. The chair stopped. Facing them, waiting. A deep voice suddenly echoed from the darkness behind the table. "You are late." The candles went out, one after another, until only a single flame remained. And beside that final candle, a tall shadow appeared. It wore the same long black coat they had seen outside the palace gate. The shadow slowly raised its head, and this time, they could see its face. It was an old man. His skin was pale. His eyes were completely black, and on his chest was an ancient Ottoman emblem. The man smiled. Then he whispered, "Welcome home." The room fell completely silent. The old man stood beside the final candle. His face was pale. His eyes were completely black. And the ancient Ottoman emblem on his chest seemed to move slightly with every breath. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed able to breathe. Then Rafi whispered, "Who are you?" The old man smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, almost unnatural. "I am the one who keeps the house." Arif stepped forward. "What house?" The old man's smile disappeared. "This one." He slowly looked around the room. "This palace." Marin stared at him. "But this place is abandoned." The old man looked directly at her. "Abandoned?" He gave a quiet laugh. "No, never." A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room. For 1 second, the old man's shadow stretched across the entire wall. But his body didn't move. The shadow did. It slowly turned its head toward Marin. Marin stepped backward. "Arif, I saw it. Arif's voice was barely audible. The old man calmly walked toward the table. He placed one hand on the chair marked with Arif's name. You were expected. Arif stared at the name. How do you know who we are? The old man didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the next chair. Marin. Then the next. Rafi. And finally, Samir. The four friends looked at each other. Nobody had introduced themselves. Nobody had told the old man their names. Samir slowly raised his phone. How do you know our names? The old man looked at him. Then he pointed toward the wall. Because you have already been here. Samir frowned. What? The old man pointed again. This time they all looked. Hanging on the far wall was an enormous old painting. It showed a group of people standing in front of the palace. At first, the painting looked centuries old. But then Marin noticed something. One of the figures looked strangely familiar. She stepped closer. Her breathing stopped. She couldn't finish. Arif moved beside her. What? Marin pointed at the painting. The figure in the center was a young woman. She had the same face as Marin. Not similar. Not close. The exact same face. Rafi stared at the painting. That's impossible. Marin shook her head. I've never been here. The old man quietly replied. Not in this life. Nobody moved. Thunder exploded outside. The palace windows rattled violently. Then the old man walked toward another painting. This one showed a young man standing beside an old black carriage. Arif's face changed. The young man in the painting looked exactly like him. Another painting. Rafi. Another. Samir. For paintings. For faces. For names. All inside a palace they had never visited before. Arif turned toward the old man. What is this? The old man looked at the four paintings. For people. For promises. And one unfinished night. Marin whispered. What promise? The old man smiled again. That is what you came here to remember. Suddenly, one of the candles went out. Then another. Then another. The room became darker. The old man slowly stepped toward the doorway. Follow me. Arif didn't move. Where? The old man stopped. Without turning around, he answered. To the room where your story began. Then he disappeared into the darkness. The four friends stood alone. For several seconds, nobody said anything. Then Rafi whispered, We should leave. Samir nodded. Yes. Arif looked toward the doorway, but the old man's footsteps were already fading. Marin suddenly noticed something on the table. A small antique key. Beside it, a handwritten note. She picked it up. The paper was yellow with age. Only one sentence had been written on it. Do not let him remember your name. Marin's hands began to shake. She looked at the others. Guys, before she could finish, someone whispered directly behind her. Marin. She screamed. The four friends spun around. There was nobody there. But on the table, the antique key had disappeared, and the door behind them slowly locked itself. The door locked itself. For a few seconds, none of them moved. Marin was still staring at the place where the antique key had disappeared. Did you see that? Rafi nodded slowly. I saw it. Samir rushed toward the door and grabbed the handle. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. Still nothing. Arif, help me. Arif joined him. Together, they pulled with all their strength. The ancient wooden door didn't move even an inch. Then, 3 slow knocks came from the other side. Knock, knock, knock. Everyone froze. Samir whispered, "Someone's outside." Arif shook his head. "No, there's nobody outside." Another 3 knocks. This time, they came from inside the room. Knock, knock, knock. Marin slowly turned around. The room was empty, but the candles had started burning again, one by one, and the old man's chair was now facing them. Rafi whispered, "Where did he go?" No one answered. Then Samir noticed something beneath the table. A narrow wooden door, almost completely hidden beneath an old rug. He pulled the rug away. There was a small iron handle. Arif crouched beside him. That wasn't there before. Samir touched the handle. It was ice cold. He immediately pulled his hand away. "There's something underneath." Marin looked at him. "How do you know?" Samir stared at the door. "I heard something." Everyone became silent. From beneath the wooden door came a faint sound. Someone breathing. Slowly. Quietly. Then a whisper. "Help me." Rafi stepped backward. "Absolutely not." The whisper came again. "Please." This time it sounded like a woman's voice. Marin looked at the others. "We can't leave someone down there." Arif shook his head. "We don't even know what that is." But then the voice spoke again. And this time, it said Marin's name. Marin. She went completely still. The room suddenly became colder. Arif grabbed her shoulder. "Don't answer." The voice whispered again. "Marin, I'm still here." Marin's eyes filled with fear. "I know that voice." Everyone looked at her. "Who is it?" She swallowed. "My mother." Nobody spoke. Her mother had been dead for 6 years. Rafi whispered, "That's not your mother." Marin nodded. "I know." Then the wooden door beneath the table slowly opened by itself. A narrow staircase appeared. It descended into complete darkness. Cold air rose from below, and with it, the smell of wet earth. Arif turned on his phone flashlight. The beam disappeared into the darkness after only a few steps. At the bottom of the staircase, something moved. A shadow. Then it disappeared. Samir whispered, "We should go." Arif looked toward the locked palace door. There was no other way out. Finally, he stepped onto the first stair. The old wooden step creaked beneath his weight. Then Marin followed. Then Rafi. Then Samir. They descended slowly. One step, then another. The sounds of the storm gradually disappeared above them. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became, until there was no rain, no thunder, no wind, only their breathing. Then they reached the bottom. The corridor beneath the palace was narrow and ancient. Stone walls surrounded them. Water dripped from the ceiling. At the end of the corridor, a faint golden light was glowing. Arif raised his phone. Someone is down here. They slowly walked toward the light, and then they saw it. An enormous underground chamber. At the center stood a stone table, and on the table were 4 old photographs. Arif picked up the first one. His hands began shaking. It showed the same 4 friends, standing together, in front of the palace. But the photograph looked decades old. Rafi stared at it. "That's us." Samir shook his head. "No, it can't be." Marin picked up the second photograph. On the back, someone had written a date, 20 years ago. Then she turned the photograph over. Her face went completely pale. The 4 friends were standing exactly where they had been standing tonight. Same faces, same clothes, same palace, same rain. But there was one difference. In the photograph, there were 5 people. The 5th person stood behind them, wearing a long black coat and smiling. Marin slowly turned toward the darkness behind them. The chamber was empty. Then a voice whispered from somewhere nearby. "You finally remembered." The golden light went out, and something grabbed Arif's shoulder. Arif felt a hand grip his shoulder. Cold. Unnaturally cold. He tried to turn around. "Don't." Marin's voice echoed through the chamber. Arif froze. The hand tightened. Then suddenly, it disappeared. Arif spun around. There was nothing behind him, only darkness. His phone flashlight flickered. Once, twice. Then came back on. Rafi was breathing heavily. "Was someone standing behind you?" Arif nodded. "I felt a hand." Samir looked toward the corridor. "Then where's it?" Nobody answered. Marin was still holding the old photograph. She stared at the 5th figure, the man in the black coat. His face was clearer now, and somehow he looked familiar. Not to Arif, not to Rafi, not to Samir, to Marin. She slowly whispered, "I've seen him before." Arif turned toward her. "Where?" She shook her head. "I don't know." Then something strange happened. The photograph began to change. The 5th figure slowly disappeared. The 4 friends remained, but behind them, another person appeared, a woman, standing beside the black-coated man. Marin dropped the photograph. "No!" She stepped backward. Rafi picked it up. "What?" Marin pointed at the woman. "That's my mother." Everyone stared at her. The woman in the photograph looked exactly like Marin's mother. Same face, same eyes, same expression. But the date on the back of the photograph was 20 years earlier. Marin's mother had been alive then, but she had never mentioned this place, never mentioned the palace, never mentioned Istanbul, never mentioned the man in black. Samir whispered, "Maybe your mother knew about this." Marin shook her head. "My mother was terrified of old buildings. She never traveled. Not here. Arif looked around the underground chamber. Then why is she in this photograph? Before anyone could answer, a sound came from the corridor. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Approaching them. One step. Then another. Then another. The four friends stood completely still. The footsteps stopped. At the entrance of the chamber, a tall shadow appeared. The man in the black coat stepped into the golden light. It was the same man from the gate, the same man from the palace, the same man from the photograph. He looked directly at Marin and smiled. You remember her. Marin couldn't speak. The man walked closer. You were very young. Marin's voice finally came out. Who are you? The man stopped. Then he answered quietly. Your mother asked me to protect you. Marin stared at him. My mother is dead. The man's expression changed. No, she is not. Thunder suddenly exploded somewhere above the palace. Dust fell from the ceiling. The man looked upward. She is still waiting. Marin shook her head. Where? The man pointed toward the deepest part of the underground chamber, beyond the seventh door. Rafi looked around. There are no doors. The man smiled. There will be. He raised one hand. A section of the stone wall began to move. Slowly. Ancient stone grinding against ancient stone. A hidden doorway appeared. Beyond it was a narrow passage filled with darkness. Marin stared into it. Why are you helping us? The man's smile disappeared. I'm not. He stepped backward. I'm helping her. Then the hidden doorway slammed shut. The man vanished. The chamber became silent again. Arif rushed toward the wall. He searched for the doorway. Nothing. Only solid stone. Samir suddenly pointed toward the floor. There was something lying there. A small brass key. Beside it, a piece of paper. Marin picked it up. 3 words were written across it. 7th door. Midnight. Rafi looked at his watch. 12:41 a.m. Samir whispered, We have less than 20 minutes. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the palace, a woman began to sing. A soft lullaby. A lullaby Marin remembered from childhood. Her mother's lullaby. Marin closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. Then she whispered, Mom? The singing stopped. Arif felt a hand grip his shoulder. Cold. Unnaturally cold. He tried to turn around. Don't. Marin's voice echoed through the chamber. Arif froze. The hand tightened. Then suddenly, it disappeared. Arif spun around. There was nothing behind him. Only darkness. His phone flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then came back on. Rafi was breathing heavily. Was someone standing behind you? Arif nodded. I felt a hand. Samir looked toward the corridor. Then where's it? Nobody answered. Marin was still holding the old photograph. She stared at the fifth figure, the man in the black coat. His face was clearer now, and somehow he looked familiar. Not to Arif, not to Rafi, not to Samir, to Marin. She slowly whispered, "I've seen him before." Arif turned toward her. "Where?" She shook her head. "I don't know." Then something strange happened. The photograph began to change. The fifth figure slowly disappeared. The four friends remained, but behind them, another person appeared, a woman, standing beside the black-coated man. Marin dropped the photograph. "No!" She stepped backward. Rafi picked it up. "What?" Marin pointed at the woman. "That's my mother." Everyone stared at her. The woman in the photograph looked exactly like Marin's mother. Same face, same eyes, same expression. But the date on the back of the photograph was 20 years earlier. Marin's mother had been alive then, but she had never mentioned this place. Never mentioned the palace. Never mentioned Istanbul. Never mentioned the man in black. Samir whispered, "Maybe your mother knew about this." Marin shook her head. "My mother was terrified of old buildings. She never traveled. Not here." Arif looked around the underground chamber. "Then why is she in this photograph?" Before anyone could answer, a sound came from the corridor. Footsteps. Slow, measured, approaching them. One step, then another, then another. The four friends stood completely still. The footsteps stopped. At the entrance of the chamber, a tall shadow appeared. The man in the black coat stepped into the golden light. It was the same man from the gate. The same man from the palace. The same man from the photograph. He looked directly at Marin and smiled. "You remember her." Marin couldn't speak. The man walked closer. "You were very young." Marin's voice finally came out. "Who are you?" The man stopped. Then he answered quietly, "Your mother asked me to protect you." Marin stared at him. "My mother is dead." The man's expression changed. "No, she is not." Thunder suddenly exploded somewhere above the palace. Dust fell from the ceiling. The man looked upward. "She is still waiting." Marin shook her head. "Where?" The man pointed toward the deepest part of the underground chamber, beyond the seventh door. Rafi looked around. "There are no doors." The man smiled. "There will be." He raised one hand. A section of the stone wall began to move. Slowly, ancient stone grinding against ancient stone. A hidden doorway appeared. Beyond it was a narrow passage filled with darkness. Marin stared into it. "Why are you helping us?" The man's smile disappeared. "I'm not." He stepped backward. "I'm helping her." Then the hidden doorway slammed shut. The man vanished. The chamber became silent again. Arif rushed toward the wall. He searched for the doorway. Nothing. Only solid stone. Samir suddenly pointed toward the floor. There was something lying there. A small brass key. Beside it, a piece of paper. Marin picked it up. 3 words were written across it. 7th door. Midnight. Rafi looked at his watch. 12:41 a.m. Samir whispered, "We have less than 20 minutes." Then, from somewhere deep beneath the palace, a woman began to sing. A soft lullaby. A lullaby Marin remembered from childhood. Her mother's lullaby. Marin closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. Then she whispered, "Mom?" The singing stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then a woman's voice answered from the darkness, "Come find me." And somewhere beyond the stone walls, a 7th door slowly unlocked. The sound of the lock echoed through the underground chamber. Click, then silence. The 4 friends stood frozen. Marin was still staring into the darkness where the woman's voice had disappeared. "Come find me." Those words kept repeating inside her head. Arif picked up the brass key from the floor. "We need to get out of here." Marin looked at him. "No." Arif stared at her. "What?" "My mother is here." Rafi shook his head. "Marin, that wasn't your mother. You don't know that. I know dead people don't usually invite you into underground tunnels." Samir looked toward the dark corridor. "Maybe we shouldn't argue." He pointed at the wall. A thin golden line had appeared between 2 ancient stones. It formed the outline of a door. 7. 7 narrow vertical marks were carved into the stone. The 7th one was glowing. Arif slowly inserted the brass key. The key turned by itself. Click. The stone wall trembled. Then, the 7th door opened. Cold air rushed through the chamber. The smell of rain filled the underground passage. But that was impossible. They were beneath the palace. There shouldn't have been rain down here. Then they heard it. Water. Thousands of drops falling somewhere in the darkness. The 4 friends stepped through the doorway. The passage beyond was incredibly narrow. Ancient stone walls pressed in on both sides. Water ran down the walls like tears. Arif held his phone flashlight ahead. "Stay together." They moved slowly, 1 step at a time. Then Marin stopped. "Wait." Everyone turned. She was staring at the wall. There was writing carved into the stone. Hundreds of names. Some were almost completely erased. Others were still visible. Samir moved closer. "What does it say?" Marin ran her fingers over the writing. "These are names." Rafi looked around. "Names of who?" Marin didn't answer. She had found something. Her fingers stopped. There, deep in the wall, was her mother's name. She stepped backward. "No!" Arif looked at the inscription. "Are you sure?" Marin nodded. Her mother's full name was carved into the stone, and beneath it was a date. 20 years ago. Rafi whispered, "Why would her name be here?" Marin couldn't answer. Then another name caught her attention. Arif. He stared at it. His name was carved directly beneath hers. Then Rafi. Then Samir. 4 names. The same 4 names. All followed by the same date. 20 years ago. Samir's face went pale. "We weren't even here 20 years ago." A soft sound came from behind them. Someone laughing. The 4 friends turned. The corridor was empty. Then the laugh came again. Closer, Marin whispered. Keep moving. They continued deeper. After several minutes, the passage opened into another chamber. This room was different. There were no lanterns, no furniture, only a large circular pool in the center. The water was perfectly still, but floating on the surface were dozens of old photographs. Rafi approached the pool. Don't touch them. He stopped. One photograph slowly drifted toward him. It turned face up. Rafi stared at it. It showed the 4 friends standing beside the palace. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind them stood a young woman. Marin recognized her immediately. Her mother. But something was wrong. Her mother looked terrified. And beside her stood the man in black. He had one hand on her shoulder. Another photograph floated closer. This one showed the same woman holding a baby. Marin stepped toward it. The baby was her. She could recognize the small blanket, the tiny silver bracelet. Her mother's face was covered in tears. Then the water began moving. Slowly, the photographs started circling the pool. Faster, faster. The room filled with the sound of rushing water. Arif grabbed Marin's arm. Move. But before they could leave, a woman's voice came from beneath the water. Marin. She froze. Mom? The water suddenly rose. A pale hand emerged from the center of the pool. Then another. Something was climbing out. The 4 friends backed away. A woman's face slowly appeared above the water. Wet hair covered her face. Her eyes were closed. Marin whispered, Mom. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes opened. They were completely black. And she smiled. You're finally home. The chamber lights suddenly appeared. Dozens of golden lanterns ignited around them. And behind the woman, standing in the water, was the man in black. He looked at Marin. Then he whispered, The palace has remembered you. The 7th door slammed shut behind the 4 friends. The 7th door slammed shut behind them. The sound echoed through the underground chamber like a gunshot. Arif immediately ran toward it. He grabbed the handle. Nothing. He pulled harder. Still nothing. Behind him, the woman slowly climbed out of the black water. Her wet hair hung over her face. Water streamed from her clothes onto the ancient stone floor. Marin couldn't move. She was staring at the woman. Every feature, every movement, every little detail looked like her mother. But something was terribly wrong. Her mother's eyes had been warm. These eyes were completely black. Mom? Marin's voice broke. The woman smiled. Come closer. Arif grabbed Marin's arm. Don't. The woman looked at him. For the first time, her expression changed. You don't belong here. Arif stepped between them. Who are you? The woman tilted her head. You already know. Suddenly, every lantern around the chamber went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then one lantern came back on. It illuminated the water. The woman was gone. Marin screamed. Mom! Arif turned toward her. She's gone. No! Marin ran toward the pool. Arif caught her before she could reach the edge. Then, a whisper came from behind them. Marin. They turned. The woman was standing at the opposite side of the chamber, but now she looked different. Older. Her face was covered with small cuts. Her clothes were soaked and torn. She looked like someone who had been trapped somewhere for years. She raised one trembling hand. Don't trust him. Everyone looked toward the man in black. He was standing silently beside the wall. The woman pointed at him. He brought me here. The man's face remained expressionless. The woman continued. He told me the palace could save my daughter. Marin's eyes filled with tears. What happened? Her mother looked at her. I believed him. Then she pointed toward the floor. I made a promise. What promise? The woman whispered. Your life for mine. Marin stepped backward. No. The woman nodded. 20 years ago, I came here because you were dying. The chamber became silent. Your illness was getting worse. I was desperate. So I came to this palace. The man promised he could save you. Marin stared at him. And he did. Her mother smiled sadly. But the price was me. Rafi whispered. What does that mean? The woman looked toward the water. I could never leave. Samir looked around the chamber. So you've been here for 20 years? The woman nodded. Waiting. Waiting for what? The woman looked directly at Marin. For the night the palace would call you back. Marin shook her head. I don't understand. Her mother stepped closer. The palace remembers every promise. And tonight, it remembered yours. Suddenly, the man in black spoke. Enough. His voice was calm, but the entire chamber seemed to respond. The walls began to vibrate. The water in the pool started moving violently. The woman turned toward him. You promised me she would never return. The man smiled. I never promised that. You said the palace would forget her. It did. Then why is she here? The man looked at Marin. Because she remembered. Marin's breathing stopped. What did I remember? The man slowly raised his hand. The chamber walls began glowing with faint golden symbols. And suddenly, Marin saw something. A memory. A little girl, standing in this exact chamber, holding her mother's hand. She was crying. Her mother was kneeling beside her, and the man in black was standing behind them. Then the memory changed. Marin saw herself walking toward the 7th door. She heard her own childhood voice. Mom. Then her mother said something. 3 words. Words Marin had completely forgotten. Don't look back. The memory disappeared. Marin collapsed to her knees. I've been here before. Her mother nodded. Yes, Rafi whispered. But she was only a child. The woman looked at him. Children forget what adults beg them to forget. Then the man in black stepped forward. Your mother made one final mistake. Marin looked up. What mistake? The man smiled. She came back for you. The water in the pool suddenly began rising. Higher, higher, until it spilled across the floor. The woman screamed. Run! The ancient chamber began shaking violently. Stone cracked above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. And from somewhere deep beneath the palace, a massive bell began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the woman shouted. Before the seventh bell, Arif grabbed Marin's hand. What happens at the seventh? Her mother looked terrified. The palace closes. Another bell rang. 4. The water continued rising. 5. They ran toward the hidden passage. 6. Arif looked back. The man in black was still standing beside the pool. The seventh bell began to ring. Bung! The sound shook the entire underground chamber. The walls trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The water rose around their ankles. Run! Arif pulled Marin forward. Rafi and Samir followed close behind. They raced through the narrow stone passage as the bell continued to echo behind them. Bung! The sound seemed to follow them. The corridor twisted sharply to the left, then to the right. Arif held his phone flashlight ahead. Where are we going? I don't know. They kept running. Behind them, something moved through the water. Fast. Very fast. Rafi looked back. Something's coming. Don't look back. Marin screamed. They ran faster. Then the passage suddenly ended. A massive stone wall stood in front of them. Arif stopped. We're trapped. Samir slammed his hands against the wall. There's got to be another way. The seventh bell stopped. Silence. Absolute silence. Then, a voice came from behind them. You're too late. Everyone turned. The man in black stood at the far end of the corridor, completely dry. Not a single drop of water on him. He slowly walked toward them. Marin stepped backward. You said my mother was still alive. The man nodded. She is. Then let her go. He smiled. I can't. Why? Because she already gave the palace what it wanted. Marin's face went pale. What did she give? The man looked directly at her. You. The corridor suddenly became freezing cold. Arif stepped forward. What does that mean? The man ignored him. He looked at Marin. 20 years ago, your mother brought you here. You were dying. She begged the palace to save you. And it did, Marin whispered. At the cost of her life. The man shook his head. No, at the cost of your memory. Marin stared at him. What? You survived. Your mother stayed. And the palace erased every memory you had of this place. Until tonight. A sudden crack appeared in the stone wall behind them. Then another. Golden light began leaking through the cracks. Rafi stepped away. What's happening? The man smiled. The palace is opening. The wall slowly split apart. Behind it was a massive staircase. But the staircase didn't lead upward. It went deeper, far deeper, into darkness. At the bottom, a faint warm light flickered. Marin recognized it immediately. The same yellow light they had seen outside the palace. The light that had brought them here. Her mother appeared beside the man. But she was no longer wet. She looked exactly as Marin remembered her. Young, beautiful, alive. Marin's eyes filled with tears. Mom. Her mother smiled. Don't come closer. Marin took one step anyway. Mom. Her mother shook her head. Listen to me. You have to leave. I can't. You can. How? Her mother looked toward the man in black. Take the stairs. At the bottom, you'll find the first room. In that room is an old mirror. Break it, Arif asked. Why? Her mother looked at him. Because the mirror is the door. Samir stared at her. A door to where? Her mother whispered. To the place where the palace keeps the memories of everyone who ever entered. Marin stepped forward. What happens if we break it? Her mother looked terrified. Everyone comes back. Who? Everyone. Suddenly, voices began echoing from the darkness below. Hundreds of voices. Men, women, children, all whispering at once. Names. Hundreds of names. Then one voice became clear. A child's voice. It sounded exactly like Marin. Mom. Marin froze. Her mother whispered, "That's you." The child's voice came again. "Mom, don't leave me." Marin began crying. "I remember." Her mother smiled sadly. "Then you know what you have to do." The man in black suddenly raised his hand. The staircase began collapsing. Stone blocks fell from the ceiling. Arif grabbed Marin. "Go!" The four friends rushed down the stairs. Behind them, Marin heard her mother's final words. "I never stopped waiting for you." Then the stone wall slammed shut. The man in black disappeared, and the four friends were left alone, deep beneath the palace. At the bottom of the staircase stood an enormous antique mirror. Its surface was completely black, but slowly, a reflection appeared. It showed the four friends standing in the room, except there were 5 reflections, and the 5th one was smiling. The 4 friends stood completely still. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They were staring at the enormous antique mirror. 4 people stood in front of it, but 5 reflections stared back. The 5th figure stood directly behind them, tall, motionless, wearing a long black coat. Arif slowly turned around. There was nothing there. He looked back at the mirror. The 5th reflection was still there, and this time, it smiled. Marin whispered, "Don't look at it." Rafi's voice trembled. "Why?" "Because I think it wants us to." The 5th reflection slowly raised one hand. The real 4 friends didn't move, but the reflection did. It placed one finger against the inside of the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from inside the mirror. Samir stepped backward. "That's not possible." The reflection tilted its head. Then it whispered, "We've been waiting." The 4 friends froze. Arif grabbed a heavy metal object from the floor. "We break it." He stepped toward the mirror. The 5th reflection suddenly disappeared. For 1 second, the mirror showed only the 4 of them. Then another image appeared. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. She was standing in the same underground chamber. She was crying. Marin stared. "It's me." The little girl turned toward the mirror. She looked directly at Marin. Then she whispered, "Don't break it." Marin stepped closer. "Why?" The little girl pointed behind her. A woman was standing in the darkness. Her mother. But there was another person behind her. The man in black. He was holding a small silver key. The little girl began screaming. The image suddenly disappeared. The mirror became black again. Rafi whispered, "What did you see?" Marin couldn't answer. She was remembering. Pieces of her childhood were returning. The palace, the storm, her mother's hand, the seventh door, the man in black, and something else. Something she had forgotten completely. A promise. Her mother had made her promise never to return. But the palace had called her back anyway. Samir pointed at the mirror. Look, for words had appeared across the glass. One must stay. Arif shook his head. No. The words changed. One must remember. Then again, one must forget. The mirror began to crack. A thin line appeared across its surface. Then another. The crack spread like veins. Marin stepped backward. We shouldn't break it. Arif looked at her. Your mother told us to. She also told us to leave. A deep sound suddenly came from behind the mirror, like someone breathing, slowly, heavily. Then the glass began to bulge outward. Something was pressing against it from the other side. Rafi whispered, "Whatever is behind that mirror, it's trying to come through." The glass suddenly cracked open. A pale hand pushed through. Samir screamed. Arif raised the metal object. Move. The hand reached farther, fingers crawling across the broken glass. Then another hand appeared, and another. The mirror was no longer reflecting them. It had become a doorway. Through it, they could see a completely different palace. The same palace, but 20 years earlier. Rain poured outside the windows. Candles burned along the halls. People were running through the palace. And in the center of the scene stood Marin's mother, holding a small child. Young Marin. Her mother looked toward the mirror, as if she could see them. She whispered, "Please, don't let her remember." Marin began crying. "Mom." Her mother slowly raised her eyes and looked directly at her. Then she mouthed 3 words. "He's behind you." Marin's face went pale. She slowly turned. The man in black was standing directly behind her, close enough to touch. He whispered into her ear, "You finally remembered." Then the mirror shattered. The mirror shattered. Thousands of pieces of black glass exploded across the stone floor. Marin fell backward. Arif grabbed her before she hit the ground. Rafi and Samir stood frozen, but the man in black was gone. Only his voice remained. "You remembered too late." Then silence. The room was filled with broken glass, but something strange had happened. The pieces of the mirror were not reflecting the 4 friends anymore. Each fragment showed a different moment, a different memory, a different person. Rafi picked up one piece. He saw himself as a child, standing in a hospital room. He dropped it immediately. Samir picked up another. He saw his father, a man he had not seen since childhood. Samir's face changed. This place. Arif looked around. It doesn't just show memories. It keeps them. Marin slowly stood. Then she saw something beneath the broken mirror, a small wooden box. She recognized it immediately. It was the same kind of box her mother had kept beside her bed when she was a child. Marin knelt down. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a silver bracelet, an old photograph, and a handwritten letter. The letter had her name on it. Marin. She opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's. Her eyes filled with tears. The letter said, "If you are reading this, then the palace has called you back. That means I failed. I wanted you to live without knowing what I sacrificed. But some promises cannot remain forgotten forever." Marin covered her mouth. Aerith stood beside her. "Keep reading." She continued. "The man in black is not the master of this palace. He is a prisoner. He has been here longer than any of us. He feeds the palace memories, and the palace gives him another life." Marin looked up. "So he needs us." Aerith nodded slowly. The letter continued. "He will tell you that your mother belongs to the palace. That is a lie. I chose to stay. I chose to protect you. But there is one thing I never told you. You were not the reason the palace called you. You were the key." Marin stopped reading. A cold silence filled the room. Rafi whispered, "What key?" Marin looked at the final line. Her mother's handwriting became shaky. "The palace does not want your life. It wants your memory." Suddenly, every broken piece of the mirror began glowing. The chamber filled with hundreds of voices, all speaking at once. Names, dates, memories. People who had disappeared. People who had entered the palace and never returned. Then one voice became clear. The voice of Marin's mother. "Leave now." The floor began shaking. Aerith grabbed the letter. "Where?" Marin looked toward the staircase. "The palace entrance." They ran. The underground chamber began collapsing behind them. Stone fell from the ceiling. Water rushed through cracks in the walls. The voices became louder, and somewhere behind them, the man in black began laughing. They reached the staircase. They climbed. 1 step, 2, 3. The palace seemed impossibly far away. Then, a hand grabbed Rafi's ankle. He screamed. Aerith pulled him upward. Samir kicked at the darkness. The hand disappeared. They kept running. At the top of the stairs, they found the palace corridor. But it had changed. The lanterns were burning brightly. The paintings were gone. The walls looked almost new. And at the end of the corridor stood Marin's mother, alive, smiling, waiting. Marin stopped. "Mom?" Her mother nodded. "Come here." Marin took 1 step, then another. Aerith grabbed her arm. "Wait." Something was wrong. Her mother looked exactly as she had 20 years ago. Not older, not different. Exactly the same. Marin looked at the letter in her hand, then at the woman. "Tell me something only my mother would know." The woman smiled. "Your favorite lullaby." Marin shook her head. "No." The woman's smile disappeared. "My mother never knew that." Silence. The woman slowly lowered her head. Then her face changed. The skin became pale, her eyes turned black, and the man in black appeared behind her. You learned. Marin stepped backward. The man whispered, "Good. Now you are ready." The palace doors suddenly opened. Beyond them, the storm was gone. The sky was completely clear, and in the distance, the first light of dawn appeared. The man in black looked toward the sunrise. For the first time, he looked afraid. The man in black stared at the approaching sunrise. For the first time since they had seen him, he looked afraid. Marin noticed it. The sunlight. The man slowly turned toward her. "You have until the sun reaches the palace." Arif stepped forward. "Then what happens?" The man didn't answer. Marin held her mother's letter tightly. "My mother said you are a prisoner." The man's expression hardened. "Your mother knew too much. What are you?" He looked at the palace behind them. Someone who made a promise. To whom? The palace. Rafi shook his head. "A building can't make a promise." The man smiled. "This palace is not a building." Thunder suddenly rolled across the distant mountains, but the sky was clear. No clouds, no rain. The sound came from beneath the palace. The man whispered, "It is awake." The palace walls began to tremble. Ancient windows opened by themselves. Doors slammed throughout the corridors. The warm golden lanterns began going out one after another. Marin looked at the sunrise. "We need to leave." The man blocked the doorway. "No." Arif stepped forward. "Move." The man looked at him. "You still don't understand." "What?" "The palace cannot release you. Not until the promise is completed." Marin held up the letter. "My mother already paid." The man shook his head. "She paid for your life, not your freedom." Marin's face went pale. "What does the palace want?" The man looked directly into her eyes. "Someone must remain." Silence. Rafi whispered, "No." Samir looked at the entrance. "We're leaving together." The man smiled. "Then the palace will choose." Suddenly, the four friends heard four different voices. Each one called their name. Arif heard his father's voice. Rafi heard his mother's. Samir heard his sister's. Marin heard her mother. They all turned toward different corridors. Arif whispered, "Dad." Rafi stepped forward. "Mom?" Samir's eyes filled with tears. "That's my sister." Marin knew immediately. "Don't listen." The voices became louder. "Come here. We've been waiting. You don't have to leave. Stay with us." The palace was using their memories. Arif closed his eyes. "No." The voice of his father became angry. "You left me." Arif's face tightened. "You aren't my father." The corridor went silent. Rafi did the same. Samir followed. Marin opened her eyes. "My mother told me not to look back." She turned toward the palace. Then she said, "I won't." The man in black suddenly looked shocked. The sunrise reached the palace walls. Golden light touched the ancient stones. The entire building began screaming. Not a human scream, a deep sound, like thousands of voices crying together. The man fell to his knees. His black coat began to burn at the edges. He looked at Marin. "You broke the promise." Marin shook her head. "No, I remembered it." The man looked toward the palace. Then he whispered, "Then finish it." A crack appeared across the palace floor. A golden light erupted from beneath them. The four friends were thrown backward, and from inside the palace, Marin heard her mother's voice one final time. Now, Marin grabbed Arif's hand. "Run!" They ran toward the entrance. Rafi and Samir followed. Behind them, the palace began collapsing into darkness. The man in black remained on his knees. The final sunlight reached his face. For the first time, he looked human. He smiled sadly. Then he disappeared. The four friends crossed the palace gate. The moment they stepped outside, the storm returned. Torrential rain exploded across the road. Thunder shook the mountains. And behind them, the ancient palace was gone. Only an empty hill remained. No walls, no gate, no lanterns, nothing. Arif looked at his phone. The screen showed 5:47 a.m. Rafi stared at the empty hill. Was that real? Nobody answered. Then Marin looked down. She was still holding the old photograph, but the photograph had changed. There were only four people now. No man in black, no mother, just the four friends. And written on the back were three words: "The promise ends." They walked back toward their car, but before they reached it, Marin heard something. A soft voice behind her. "Don't look back." She smiled through her tears and kept walking. The four friends stood beside the car. Nobody spoke. The rain continued falling heavily around them. For the first time that night, the storm no longer felt frightening. It felt like something was leaving. Arif looked back toward the empty hill. There was nothing there. No palace, no gate, no golden lanterns. Just rain falling over dark grass. Rafi slowly opened the car door. "Let's go home." Samir nodded. They climbed inside. Arif started the engine. This time, it started immediately. The dashboard lights came on. The radio suddenly turned on by itself. Static filled the car. Then, a woman's voice came through, very faint, very far away. "Marin." Marin froze. She reached toward the radio. The voice continued. "Thank you." Then the radio went silent. Marin closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She knew that voice. It was her mother. But this time, there was no fear in it, only peace. Arif slowly drove away from the hill. The rain continued beating against the windshield. The road was almost empty. For several minutes, nobody said anything. Then Rafi looked at the back seat. Wait. Samir turned. What? Rafi was staring at something on the seat. A small silver bracelet. Marin immediately recognized it. It belonged to her mother, the same bracelet from the underground chamber. She picked it up. It was still warm. Then she noticed something engraved on the inside. A sentence. She read it silently. "I was never trapped here." Marin's breathing stopped. She turned the bracelet over. There was another line. "I was waiting for you to remember." She began to cry. Arif looked at her through the rearview mirror. "Are you okay?" Marin smiled. For the first time that night. A real smile. "Yes, I'm okay." The car continued through the storm. Behind them, the mountains slowly disappeared into the darkness. But somewhere far away, on the empty hill, a single warm yellow light appeared, just for a moment, then disappeared. The four friends never saw it. They never returned to that place, but none of them forgot what happened. Rafi stopped talking about ghosts. Samir stopped laughing at old stories. Eric kept the car key from that night locked inside a drawer. And Marin, she kept her mother's bracelet beside her bed. Years passed. Life slowly returned to normal, until one winter evening, Marin received an envelope. There was no name on it, no address, only one sentence written across the front. For the girl who came back. Her hands began shaking. She opened it. Inside was a photograph, an old photograph of the palace. The same palace, the same storm, the same golden lights. But this photograph was different. It had been taken from inside the palace, and standing near one of the windows was Marin, not the adult Marin, the child, the little girl from the memory. Beside her stood her mother, and behind them, the man in black. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He was looking toward something outside the window, something enormous, something hidden in the storm. Marin turned the photograph over. There was a final message. 5 words. The palace was not alone. She stared at the words. Then, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Nobody spoke. Only rain could be heard. Heavy rain. Torrential rain. Exactly like that night. Then a quiet voice whispered, Marin. She stopped breathing. The voice continued. The last train is waiting. The call ended. Marin slowly lowered the phone. Outside her window, rain began falling harder. She looked toward the dark street, and far away, through the rain, a warm yellow light appeared. One light, then another, until there were dozens. Marin stepped away from the window. She understood. The story had never really ended. The palace had disappeared. The promise had ended. But something else had been waiting beyond it. Something older. Something that had been watching them from the beginning. Marin closed the curtains. She placed her mother's bracelet back beside her bed. Then she whispered, Not tonight. The rain continued. The lights disappeared. And for the first time, the night became completely silent. No thunder. No footsteps. No whispers. Only rain. Soft. Steady. And endless. And somewhere beyond the sleeping mountains, a train slowly began to move through the darkness. Its destination was unknown. Its passengers were waiting, and one empty seat had Marin's name on it. The end.